So after I saw all this stuff about the gag orders, I thought, that's really weird. Because if you remember, I told you that I had a source who was actually on the ground the day that Charlie was shot, somebody who was in law enforcement.
Really?
And I basically knew a lot of the things before it ever hit the news. And so that's one of the reasons why I've been so outspoken about this, because it hasn't made any sense at all. Well, I got to thinking, I remember my source telling me something about how they were trying to keep everybody very tight-lipped. And so I went back through our messages and I found this. So on September 27th, my source said, I can't talk about it yet. Admin is on high alert about leaks. Blank advised anyone leaking information about this case would receive heavy reprimand. And I said, I'm convinced this was a hit, dude. This Tyler Patsy thing stinks to high heaven. So everyone is being very tight-lipped. Oh, for sure, bro. Once I got on scene, I could tell something was very wrong. He verified with UVU officers at UVU campus, that Charlie's team wouldn't coordinate with them regarding security, which I thought was really weird. Now, I don't know the exact protocol with this. I don't know if this is a normal thing. Is it not weird that the guest security wouldn't coordinate with the officers on campus? Like, is it not weird that they wouldn't coordinate with local officers? Is that just a normal thing? I don't know. But I just thought it was really weird.
So this guy, Ian at iWenster, you see it, he says there's proof that Charlie Kirk Security told local law enforcement that they didn't need to work with them, and that over a month ago, local law enforcement officers and everyone involved were already being told to stay quiet. That's a month before these official gag orders happened. So it's about a fair trial for Tyler. So just to let you know, there's a huge gag order. One of the most unprecedented gag orders in history is being put on the Charlie Kirk case. Isn't that interesting?
Yeah.
By a suspect judge. So I mean, how many more things can a certain powerful entity do behind the scenes to conspire before we get to call it a conspiracy? How many? So let's watch this guy. He's got a great... so he actually knows some cops that were on the ground there, and listen to what he says.
Now, truth be told, this part you've probably already seen. That happened yesterday. However, I can guarantee you didn't see the part that follows.
This is bad. This is real bad. Even mainstream media is calling this one of the most secretive trials in history. The judge is making everything secret with gag orders, including the police reports and 3,000 witnesses, associates, or anyone that knew Charlie Kirk. They're saying effectively any talk show host that knew him or talked to him was under gag order.
Sorry guys, been sick a couple days and saw this yesterday, but I wanted to verify that it was actually real because I couldn't believe what I was seeing. But alas, it's real. Watch this.
There is a substantial amount of discovery in this case, Your Honor. It's voluminous, to say the least.
His lawyers entered their formal appearance and declined to waive his right to a preliminary hearing. Judge Tony Graff has issued a gag order preventing anyone associated with the case from talking about it. It's to avoid pretrial publicity, already a big problem. A case with massive media exposure involving a high-profile figure like Charlie Kirk, but the judge wants to ensure a fairer trial for Robinson. It's also brought up a big issue involving thousands of people.
So this is real. Here are the actual gag orders. You can read them right here. Just hold down and screenshot. So after I saw all this stuff about the gag orders, I thought, that's really weird. Because if you remember, I told you that I had a source who was actually on the ground the day that Charlie was shot, somebody who was in law enforcement.
Really?
And I basically knew a lot of the things before it ever hit the news. And so that's one of the reasons why I've been so outspoken about this, because it hasn't made any sense at all. Well, I got to thinking, I remember my source telling me something about how they were trying to keep everybody very tight-lipped. And so I went back through our messages and I found this. So on September 27th, my source said, I can't talk about it yet. Admin is on high alert about leaks. Blank advised anyone leaking information about this case would receive heavy reprimand. And I said, I'm convinced this was a hit, dude. This Tyler Patsy thing stinks to high heaven. So everyone is being very tight-lipped. Oh, for sure, bro. Once I got on scene, I could tell something was very wrong. And I was thinking about our conversation. I was thinking about a couple of other things he was talking about. And I remembered that one of the things he was also talking about was the fact that he verified with UVU officers at UVU campus, that Charlie's team wouldn't coordinate with them regarding security, which I thought was really weird. Now, I don't know the exact protocol with this. I don't know if this is a normal thing. Is it not weird that the guest security wouldn't coordinate with the officers on campus? Like, is it not weird that they wouldn't coordinate with local officers? Is that just a normal thing? I don't know. But I just thought it was really weird. All the people who have called people like me crazy for saying that there's far more to this than just what they're telling us. It might be time to start considering that maybe you're wrong. Because I'll tell you what, if you want to convince people that there's nothing weird going on with this assassination, if you want to convince them that there are no conspiracy theories and that it really is just what you're telling them, you don't put gag orders on every single person that was involved in it, including all 3,000 of the attendees. You just don't do that. But see, that's what's been done. And so, once again, I'll tell you, there's definitely more to this assassination than we think. We just witnessed our modern day JFK. But hey, I'm just a conspiracy theorist, right?
Imagine being in McCoy's position, losing a mentor, a friend, a leader, and waking up to find your every step dissected in slow motion by millions. The same footage that captured chaos has now become a microscope, one pointed directly at him. Every blink, every hesitation, every turn of the head becomes a question mark. And yet, imagine being the public, sitting behind screens, waiting for answers that never quite arrive, watching press conferences that feel rehearsed, statements that sound polished, while the raw emotion of what happened still echoes. Please, before we move on, don't forget to drop your comment as you listening to this new updates. We would definitely respond to all comment. We will be glad to hear your feedbacks on this report. We stand for justice. We stand for Charlie moments before the shot that ended Charlie Kirk's life. Cameras were rolling, not the kind built for protection, but for preservation, for legacy, for the story he believed was still being written. And in those very frames stands a familiar face. Mikey McCoy, Charlie's chief of staff, his confidant, the man who had walked beside him for years. Seconds later, as the sound that would change everything echoes across the auditorium, McCoy moves in a direction few expected. Security rushes toward the stage. McCoy walks away. It's a small detail, a few seconds in a flood of confusion, yet it's one that refuses to fade, not because it proves anything sinister, but because it feels like a gap in the truth. And in that silence, between what's confirmed and what's unexplained, the public is left to carry a weight no one should have to bear. The weight of wondering why. What do you think? Is the case moving forward carefully, or is progress being slowed by procedural delays? Share your thoughts in the comments below. That's where we hear your thought, because we will definitely respond to all comment and where you watching from. To stay updated on every development, subscribe now, turn on notifications, and also don't hesitate to support this movement so you stay informed as new update becomes available. This is Detective Max, and together we fight for justice. Charlie Kirk's assassination in Orem, Utah, on September 10th, 2025, sent shockwaves through the nation. For millions, it wasn't just the loss of a political figure. It was the loss of a father, a husband, a voice that defined an era of conversation, conflict, and conviction. Within hours, authorities confirmed the arrest of 22-year-old Tyler James Robinson, a suspect described as acting alone. The charges are heavy: aggravated murder, obstruction of justice, tampering with evidence. Investigators insist the case is straightforward. One shooter, one weapon, one tragic moment that spiraled into national grief. But in the quiet corners of the internet, where slowed-down clips, eyewitness posts, and unfiltered reactions move faster than official press releases, another current has begun to form, not one driven by malice, but by unease. Because in those same moments caught on camera, people noticed details that didn't sit right, movements, gestures, glances that raise more questions than answers. And when those questions meet silence, something dangerous happens. Speculation begins to feel like the only form of honesty left. Not because people want to accuse, but because they're tired of being told to stop asking. The truth is, no one online wants to rewrite the facts of that day. They just want to understand them. They want to believe that every second of footage has been reviewed, every inconsistency explained, every gap in the story addressed. Because when transparency fades, the public doesn't fill the void with hate, they fill it with hurt. And that's what this conversation has become. Not an attack, but a reflection of collective grief, wrapped in confusion, searching for the dignity of clarity. Then came the footage, short, grainy, and almost ordinary at first glance. A clip now circulating across social media, appears to show Mikey McCoy standing several feet from the stage, the same stage where Charlie Kirk was moments away from finishing his address. Former Senate candidate Sam Parker was among the first to study it closely, frame by frame, not for spectacle, but for understanding. In one still, McCoy is seen glancing down, phone in hand. In the next, a flash, a scream, confusion flooding the room. As others rush toward the sound, McCoy takes a step back, then another. No sprint, no visible collapse, just distance. And that's what captured the internet's attention. Not an accusation, but a mystery. Because human instinct usually drives us toward the fallen, toward the noise, toward the chaos. But here, the movement was reversed, deliberate, quiet, hard to interpret. Some say it was shock, the kind that freezes the body before the mind can react. Others believe it was instinct, to get out of harm's way before helping begins. But regardless of intent, one fact remains. That brief moment, those few seconds of calm amidst panic, became the seed of a question too heavy to ignore. Why did one man step away, while the world around him ran forward? No one is pointing fingers. No one is declaring guilt. The concern isn't about conspiracy. It's about clarity. Because when something looks out of place in the middle of tragedy, silence only deepens the wound. And maybe that's why this clip, more than any rumor or theory, has kept people awake at night. Not because it proves wrongdoing, but because it reminds us that truth can hide in the smallest, quietest gestures, and that until those gestures are explained, closure remains just out of reach. Let's be clear from the start. There is no public evidence suggesting Mikey McCoy had any involvement in the shooting. Law enforcement hasn't implied it. No verified report has even hinted at it. But that hasn't stopped people from feeling uneasy, because what's being questioned isn't guilt, it's behavior. In moments of chaos, humans respond in unpredictable ways. Some freeze, some run, some simply move without thought, instinct taking over where reason fails. And yet, when that moment involves someone so close to the victim, someone whose job was to protect, to plan, to stay near, those natural reactions begin to look unnatural. Not because they are wrong, but because they don't fit the story people expected to see. That's where discomfort begins. The public isn't trying to condemn a man. They're trying to reconcile what they saw with what they feel. Because optics matter. A single image, a single direction of movement, can rewrite the emotional meaning of an entire tragedy. And while investigators look for hard facts, timelines, fingerprints, digital traces, the public wrestles with something less tangible, the haunting possibility that something crucial happened right before their eyes, and they didn't recognize it until it was too late. That's not a hunt for a villain. It's a human need, the need to make sense of loss, to find shape in confusion, to fill the unbearable silence with something that feels like closure. The guilt here doesn't belong to McCoy. It belongs to all of us, for asking the questions we wish we didn't have to ask. Because deep down, we know that if roles were reversed, if someone we trusted seemed to step away in our darkest moment, we'd be asking the same thing. Not out of hate, but out of hurt. Within hours, the footage reached every corner of the internet. Hashtags tied to McCoy's name trended across multiple platforms, not out of hatred, but out of disbelief. Threads multiplied, videos were slowed down, angles compared, timelines reconstructed by strangers trying to become investigators overnight. Some claimed McCoy disappeared for several minutes after the shot. Others countered that he simply stepped aside to clear the path for security. And in between those two extremes, lives a nation trying to understand what it just saw. It's strange how fast tragedy becomes content. Within hours, what was once grief became playback. People weren't watching for entertainment. They were searching for something that felt like sense. Because the official statements came slowly. Because the silence between updates grew louder than words. And in that silence, interpretation filled the gaps, each clip edited, each caption reshaped, each comment building a story that might never have existed. The truth, most likely, lies somewhere between perception and panic, between the clarity of video and the confusion of trauma. But moments like this remind us how fragile truth can be. It doesn't always vanish because someone hides it. Sometimes it disappears because everyone is shouting at once. Still, one question echoes through every thread, every replay, every pause button hit in disbelief. Why did he walk away? Maybe it was instinct. Maybe it was shock. Maybe it was something no camera can capture. Grief in motion. Yet the longer no one explains, the more the internet fills the void. And in that gap, clarity becomes the casualty, not just of a moment, but of trust itself. Imagine being in McCoy's position, losing a mentor, a friend, a leader, and waking up to find your every step dissected in slow motion by millions. The same footage that captured chaos has now become a microscope, one pointed directly at him. Every blink, every hesitation, every turn of the head becomes a question mark. And yet, imagine being the public, sitting behind screens, waiting for answers that never quite arrive, watching press conferences that feel rehearsed, statements that sound polished, while the raw emotion of what happened still echoes. It's not suspicion for the sake of drama. It's exhaustion, the kind that grows when truth feels rationed out in pieces. This moment stopped being just about McCoy long ago. It's about the fragile thread of trust that holds the public and the powerful together. When communication stalls, emotion takes over. When facts are delayed, feelings become the evidence. That's why people replay the video, not because they want to accuse, but because they can't stand the silence. They're not hunting for guilt, they're reaching for closure. And the hardest part to admit, the longer we go without clarity, the easier it becomes to fill the void with fear. This isn't a witch hunt. It's a cry for honesty, one that says, show us something real, before speculation becomes the only story left. For the sake of truth and closure, the full footage must be released. Every frame, every timestamp, every angle, not for speculation, not for entertainment, but for clarity, the kind that ends harmful whispers before they grow into permanent scars. Because silence doesn't heal, it festers. And in that silence, narratives begin to breed, each one a little louder, a little darker, a little further from reality. Transparency isn't about blame, it's about trust. It's about giving a grieving nation something solid to hold on to, instead of asking them to settle for polished statements and partial truths. If there's nothing to hide, then showing everything should cost nothing. But if even one angle remains unseen, 1 second stays blurred, one question goes unanswered, then doubt becomes the only thing left to believe in. This isn't about pointing fingers. It's about peace of mind, about giving both McCoy and the public the same gift, the right to know what really happened. Because right now, one side is drowning in suspicion, and the other in silence. And somewhere between those two extremes lies the truth, waiting to be acknowledged, waiting to be shown. When a political figure is murdered in broad daylight, and questions linger about what happened in the seconds after, the responsibility doesn't just fall on investigators. It falls on every institution that promised accountability. The agencies that said they'd release details. The networks that vowed to report without bias. The leaders who promised transparency. Because when silence or selective editing enters the mix, it creates an emotional vacuum the internet rushes to fill. That's how conspiracy becomes comfort, when truth feels out of reach, and the official story sounds too rehearsed to feel real. Every unspoken detail becomes a seed. Every missing clip becomes proof. Not because it is proof, but because the public is left with nothing else to hold on to. And it's in that emptiness that imagination takes over, reshaping pain into theory, and theory into certainty. But this isn't just about one shooting, or one unanswered question. It's about a pattern, the slow erosion of faith between the people and the powers meant to serve them. Because every time clarity is delayed, another fraction of trust disappears. Another family, another community, another nation begins to wonder whether truth only comes out when it's convenient. The cost of that doubt doesn't show up in headlines. It shows up in silence, in cynicism, in the quiet withdrawal of a public that no longer believes anyone will tell them the full story. Maybe McCoy was just shocked. Maybe he froze, disconnected, lost his sense of direction. In chaos, logic dissolves, and the body reacts before the mind can catch up. Maybe that's all it was. But every unanswered maybe is a wound that keeps the nation bleeding. Every moment left unexplained becomes another reason for the public to lose faith, not in one man, but in the systems built to protect truth itself. We're not asking for punishment. We're asking for presence, for someone, anyone, to explain the moment that changed everything. Because when silence becomes the official response, grief starts to sound like accusation. And that's not fair. Not to McCoy, not to Charlie, not to anyone caught in the middle of what the public was never allowed to fully see. The guilt that lingers now doesn't belong to one man. It belongs to all of us, to the reporters who hesitate to ask, the agencies that hesitate to answer, and the millions watching, trying to make sense of what still doesn't add up. We weren't there when the shot rang out, but we're here now in silence. At this point feels like complicity. Charlie Kirk deserves truth, not rumor. His supporters deserve closure, not clipped footage. And Mikey McCoy, if misunderstood, deserves the chance to clear his name publicly, without silence being mistaken for guilt. Because silence has weight, it shapes perception. It decides what the public remembers, and what they're told to forget. So let's ask, calmly, firmly, and without malice, show us everything. Every second of footage, every statement, every unanswered question. Not for vengeance, not for vengeance, not for outrage, but for truth, because truth is the only thing strong enough to carry the weight of what happened that day. Charlie Kirk built a career on conviction, on asking hard questions in the open. To honor that legacy, we must do the same. Show us everything. Because only transparency can end what speculation began, and only honesty can finally let this story rest.